Greetings all, Shane Bruce, Resto Mod Daisy, and today we have a video about the mystery of the air tubes. Dun dun dun! You're making me sick, stop that. Oh, God.
We're rolling.
Motion sickness. Now, what is an air tube? An air tube is a pivotal piece of equipment on a Daisy BB gun because this little guy here is what lets air get compressed in the compression chamber. It's then inserted into the barrel where it puffs gently on the back of your BBs, forcing them out of the muzzle at velocities sometimes in excess of 350 feet a second. So it's an accurate little spitter. And air tubes have been in Daisy products since the get-go. Let's take a look up here and we'll look at the complete plunger assembly. This is the engine that actually drives your Daisy. The plunger assembly, the mainspring, the compression cup, and the mighty air tube. Now, in modern production Daisies, you'll notice the very end of this air tube does not have a visible seam. That's because it's, miracle of miracles, a seamless tubing. But it's a fairly small diameter, so it only has a certain amount of capability to transmit air, and transmit air quickly at that. One of the things you do when you start modding with Daisy lever guns, and you're trying to get a little bit more speed out of that tired old under-engineered power plant, is you start swapping things. First thing that might come off and go back on is a more powerful spring. The second leg of the power triad is to do something about the air tube. If you can increase its apparent bore diameter, and you'll see that on the left there is a big hole, and on the right is a small hole, then you'll get more air through that tube in a shorter period of time. And this will enable you to put more speed on your BB. Now, well, overboring air tubes can only be done on the more recent current production pieces from Daisy because they're built out of seamless tubing. As they're manufactured out of Chinesium, they're manufactured in China, but they're seamless. As an example, let's take a look at some earlier tubes from earlier guns. That one's got some schmutz on it. But you'll notice when you look at the end of the tubes here that you'll see a faint black line. See that one there on the right? You've got a faint black line at roughly 12 o'clock. That is the seam where this tube was made into a tube from a flat piece of steel. Normally, as you take a look at your aperture here, you'll also see a seam. And that's where they took a flat piece of steel and they rolled it into this air tube. So a seamed air tube can be overboard, but you will break bits like nobody's business. And believe me, once you start going busting up these extra long 764 drill bits, you'll discover that you don't want to break them because, you know, they're like $8 a pop. Jesus, that's a lot of money. So you want to use seamless tubing, and that means the new tubing. You don't, as much as you'd like to, unless you're suicidal or maybe you've got stock in a Bosch drill bit distribution firm, you probably wouldn't want to try to overbore one of the old style air tubes because they are real seamless. But man, take a look at the aperture on this one. I mean, they are tiny beyond belief and do not take well to overboring. But overboring the current production tube is a good idea. I do it almost every build I do is overboard because I want to get the most speed I can get out of the gun. So that's what the product looks like. Now, how do you go about doing that? How do we go about doing that? We're going to shift over to the drill press here in just a second, and I'll show you. Okay, we're at the drill press. There's several ways you can do this type of work. I've got the tools that let me do it this way. This is the way I do it. Here's our air tube we're going to overbore. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to lock it into our chuck. We're going to check and make sure that we're lined up on the work. And that looks good in that angle. And that looks good in that angle. Then we're going to lock it down in the chuck. And then we are going to overbore it. Now, this process takes a little bit of time. And the reason it takes a little bit of time is because as we're doing this, you'll notice we've got a really,
show people what you do. You put on
really long drill bit. And I just put a little bit of tap magic on it. So I normally use a little bit of tap magic on this job just to make the cutting a little easier. So the process basically is you chuck the work into the chuck, you mount your drill bit in a fixed bit. The drill does not spin, the work spins, because we're going to make a long skinny hole in a long skinny tube with a very small drill bit. So hit your speed. I like to run it as slow as it will possibly go on my multiple speed drill press. And then you run it down. As you start cutting, you'll see little bits of steel starting to slide out of there. That's called swarf. And as it accumulates, because we're drilling into a narrow, confined cavity, you want to clear it off. And that's what makes this take some time, because you've got to constantly be cleaning your tool bit. You work it down a little bit, knock the swarf out. Work it down a little bit, knock the swarf out. If you don't do this, if you try to run it all the way down without cleaning it, you will break your bit. Now, you may get 2 or 3 air tubes drilled before you break the bit, but you're going to break the bit. And the objective in modding guns is to get the guns modded, not to chew up your tooling. Because money that you spend on replacing broken bits could have been spent on buying more guns. And I'll let you sort that out as to which is more desirable. So it's a bit of a repetitive process. I like to go down, maybe 1/8 of an inch at a pop, and then back out and clean that swarf out, because it's a very small bit. And it will bind up inside the drill bit itself if you don't clear the swarf out. So we'll continue to work down the length of the bit, getting our junk out of the way as we go, until we get all the way to the blue tape mark, which is our depth indicator. And once we've gotten to the blue tape mark, that tells us that we have gotten far enough and can stop drilling. Because we don't want to go past the aperture opening in the air tube itself, because that's where the air gets squeezed out of the compression chamber into that tiny little aperture, and then shoots up the air tube and down the bore of the actual barrel itself, pushing that BB along the way. So in terms of the power triad, the 3 things that you can readily and easily do with the Daisy are replace the mainspring, either overbore your air tube or get an overboard air tube. They are available on eBay in a variety of spots and places. And the third thing is to swap out your bottle cap shot tube for a current production Model 25 shot tube, because the Model 25 shot tube has a tighter bore in the barrel. The thing holds the BBs, and also threads securely into your abutment washer, because it doesn't have the skip thread, because it doesn't have a lightning loader and doesn't have a load gate that has to be covered or adjustable to be covered. All right, and we're getting down close to being done. About another inch or so of drilling to go. And then, once we get to our tape, we'll be done with the job. Then we can unchuck it, and if we're going to drill some more air tubes, chuck up the next one. And off we go. It's amazing to me just how much stuff built up on those threads in 1/8 of an inch. You know, you've only drilled 1/8 of an inch of the interior of that tube, but you've still made all of that swarf. And once we're down this far, we're past the actual cutting ports of the thread on the shaft of the drill bit. That stuff gets built up, and it's already hot, because you don't want to touch this drill bit right now. Then it'll stick cause some chatter and drag. And it's a thin enough bit where you need to worry about that, because those edges will just break right off. And that's not any fun, because then you got to go spend more money on more tooling. All right, we're almost there. Almost there. It's kind of like that Death Star trench run. Almost there. Oh, not quite. Almost there. Oh no, not quite. One more pass and we ought to be done. Let's see. Yeah, we've broken through. Okay, let me take it out. Turn off the press. Extract our now overboard air bit. And we can, oh, look at that. Dude, that's a nicely overboard one. And we've also increased the aperture slightly where the air goes in from the compression chamber. All part of the process. Well, kids, that's all we've got today for you on overboring air tubes for Daisy lever action BB guns. This is Shane Bruce, the rest of my Daisy, signing off.